Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Okay, so in 1935, there was an undefeated rising black heavyweight star, knocking out everyone. His name was Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber. Because of his power, his technique, his skill set, the perception was it was only inevitable that he would eventually become the heavyweight champion of the world. Now, keep in mind, after Jack Johnson became the first black heavyweight champion of the world, America did not allow a black fighter to fight for a heavyweight title for 22 years. So as Joe Louis was closing in on a title shot, old media start writing articles. I'm talking about big newspapers, like ESPN type stuff back then. They started writing articles explaining why, quote, Joe Louis should never be champion. In other words, they realized that Joe Louis was so talented, it was only a matter of time. If you give him a shot, he's going to become the next heavyweight champion of the world.
When Joe Louis knocked out Primo Carnera, big article entitled, Joe Louis Must Never Be Champion. Mainly it was all kind of riots. It would disturb the structure in the United States. Can you imagine that? Why Joe Louis must never be champion.
Now you heard the boxing writer right there. He said, can you imagine that? Why he must never be champion? Of course I can imagine that. Because today we're seeing articles like this one right here. Look at the title of this article. It says, WBC calling Kambosos undisputed champion makes Haney fight unnecessary. But the rhetorical question is, why, as a boxing writer, why would you be telling the public it's unnecessary to fight an undefeated champion that will leave no doubt and will, more importantly, leave no dispute of who the undisputed lightweight champion is of the world? Not only that, but knowing that Devin Haney has been chasing all of the top lightweights. Hell, so many fighters have avoided Devin Haney, they could create their own baseball team and call themselves the lightweight Dodgers. So if it's unnecessary to fight the undefeated WBC champion that will leave no doubt in people's mind that you are undisputed, why would it be necessary for you to fight Ryan Garcia or Vasil Lomachenko or anyone else? Why only say it's unnecessary to fight Devin Haney? Do you guys know how the great Lennox Lewis became the heavyweight champion of the world? He became the heavyweight champion of the world because the champion at the time, Riddick Bowe, refused to fight his mandatory, which was Lennox Lewis. You see, Riddick Bowe, he knew Lennox Lewis very well because Lennox Lewis had actually stopped Riddick Bowe in the Olympics in the gold medal match, stopped him in the second round. So Riddick Bowe, he wanted no smoke with Lennox Lewis when Lewis became his mandatory. This is the same situation Devin Haney was in when he became Vasil Lomachenko's mandatory. Vasil, he decided to do the same thing that Riddick Bowe did, which is vacate his title when he found out that Devin Haney was his mandatory. The only difference is he had this made-up franchise status that Riddick Bowe didn't have. Vasil didn't want to fight Devin Haney, so he vacated the belt, and according to the WBC president, it was Lomachenko and his team that reached out to the WBC and in so many words basically said, what can we do about this Devin Haney problem? Is there any way I can keep my belt without having to fight Devin Haney? Can you do the same thing you did for Canelo? Can you do it for me? Can you give me that franchise status to help me save face? Don't you guys find it just a little bit ironic that outside of Teofimo Lopez, Canelo Alvarez, and Lomachenko, no one else wants this quote-unquote WBC franchise status? Nobody else wants it. Just think about this. There are 17 weight classes, and this WBC status, this franchise status, is only in 2 weight classes. There's only 2 people that have this belt. Meanwhile, the WBC belt that Devin Haney has, a champion has that belt in every single weight class. So with the controversy and all of these contradictions, why would a boxing writer be saying it is completely unnecessary for George Kambosos to fight Devin Haney? And the answer is simple. Because just like old media didn't want Joe Louis to fight for a world title for the heavyweight division because they believed that he would win, they don't want to see Devin Haney fight for Undisputed, something that old media recently put on such a high pedestal. And now everything that they said about Undisputed, constantly praising fighters like Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos, they're undisputed, they're undisputed. Old media doing all of this, it actually backfired on them because all the disrespect to Devin Haney made Devin Haney want to become the real undisputed champion that much more. So much more that Devin Haney, he took one of the most egregious splits to make this fight happen. This is one of the worst deals ever, but Devin Haney is doing it for legacy. This is the only way George Kambosos would take this fight, is if George Kambosos had these ridiculous demands like 80% of the split and a rematch clause that would have to be in his backyard where he would still get an 80% split, even without him having the belts in a rematch. This was the only way George would take the fight. So Devin Haney had to do the same thing that Jack Johnson had to do when he fought Tommy Burns. Tommy Burns, he wanted $30,000 and Jack Johnson would only get $5,000. And it's so funny because I told you guys in a previous video that when Tommy Burns was asking for $30,000, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of money today, but I told you guys, $30,000 back then in the early 1900s was equivalent to George Kambosos demanding $10 million to fight against Devin Haney. And shortly after I said that, rumors surfaced that that's around what Kambosos is getting in this fight. He's getting around 10 million and Devin Haney is getting around 2.5 million. Now, my man Aki, he was on the phone with Bill and he was asking Bill, what's the split? What's the split? And Bill said, man, I don't even want to tell you because it's just going to upset me even more. And then shortly after that conversation, the rumors started to surface of George Kambosos getting $10 million. Regardless what the exact number is, we know that it's somewhere around an 80-20 split, which is unbelievable because George Kambosos only made $160,000 when he fought against Lee Selby in the title eliminator for Teofimo Lopez's belt. Meaning at the time that George Kambosos fought Lee Selby, he was only making a fraction of what Devin Haney was making at the same time. We always hear George Kambosos saying, I'm not here buying jewelry and doing stuff like that. Yeah, because you didn't have the money to buy jewelry, even if you wanted to. This type of deal that George Kambosos has, realistically, he doesn't even have to come to win. He can literally just show up for a paycheck, lose the fight, come back, make another anywhere from $7 to $10 million, lose that fight and just retire. That's how good this deal is for George Kambosos. So once again, Devin Haney was willing to make the same type of sacrifice that Jack Johnson made. He was also willing to make the same type of sacrifice that Joe Louis made. A lot of people don't know about this as well. Did you guys know that when Joe Louis, when he fought for his world title, his deal was almost worse than Jack Johnson's deal? Because in his deal, he had to give the champion at the time, Braddock, 10% of his purses for the next 10 years. That was the only way Braddock would take the fight. Not to mention, of course, he got the lion's share of the actual fight. So guys, this is not a fight that old media wanted. In fact, it actually surprised me that a lot of the biggest boxing websites, including BoxingScene.com, they didn't even announce the press conference. I mean, it is completely standard to announce the kickoff of the press conference, especially when you're talking about a fight of this magnitude. Two undefeated champions fighting for undisputed. And it's just so ironic because once again, everyone had been constantly calling Kambosos or Teofimo undisputed, undisputed, undisputed. Now, when we have a real fight for undisputed, a lot of websites are not even reporting on the actual press conference. Now, sure, they're posting quotes of what Kambosos said, and they've reported that they're going to fight against each other before the press conference was announced, but they didn't report on the actual press conference. You see, when old media kept calling George Kambosos undisputed, really all that was a dog whistle to George Kambosos saying, please don't fight Devin Haney. Look, we're already calling you undisputed. You don't need to fight him. Because if you do fight him, you're most likely going to lose, George, because you're not good enough to beat him. So it is completely unnecessary for you to take that risk and fight this guy, risk losing to him when the WBC has already called you undisputed. This is what they're saying. That's their definition of undisputed. Their definition of undisputed is now you have an actual license to avoid the most dangerous fighter in your division because we are calling you undisputed already. But the actual definition of undisputed means there is no disputing that you have all of the 4 belts in that division, all of the 4 main belts. And that's the reason why they have billed this fight and titled it, quote, Fight for Undisputed. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called Elo Diki Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to elodiki.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram.
My name is Chris, and I'm all the way here from Anchorage, Alaska at Scalp Carolinas, and I'm here for my second treatment of SMP. Well, I was sitting at home one day and going over my Facebook page, and they have different, like advertisements popping up, and I saw one for SMP, and I saw some pictures of some guys, before and after, and I was looking at that, and it caught my attention, so I Googled it. SMP, nothing showed up in my area. So, I did a little more research, and all of a sudden, Scalp Carolinas popped up in the web browser. So I started watching his videos and seeing all the reaction from all the other people. We talked on the phone, we made appointments and everything. I sent him pictures, and he looked at them, and I was like, can you fix this? And, he pretty much said, no problem. My first session, he made me feel extremely comfortable. It was almost like I was talking to family. He started, and during the whole treatment, we talked and, about our families and our life and, and things that he does and things that I do. And before I know it, the first session was over. When you see someone doing something that they love, as much as I see Enoch Glover love what he does, it shows in his work. I wouldn't point anyone in any other direction but here to North Carolina, Scalp Carolinas, to get this done.